You know, I was thinking the other day about how sometimes we have these situations that may occur, and, you know, maybe they're traumatic, maybe they were, I don't know, intense. And we go home and we go to bed, and what do? We stay up at night. We can't go to sleep because our minds are just reeling. I mean, they are just going over and over, chewing on what happened and who said what and how things played out. And before we know it, our mind has just rolled off into so many other unhealthy things, right? Or maybe you've been in a situation where maybe you messed up in the day, and, you know, let's say you're trying to stick to a diet, okay? And you've done good, you know, and you've seen the memes on Facebook. You do good at breakfast, you do good at lunch, and then by dinner you've blown it and you've eaten the whole bag of Oreos, right? And so what happens? You start to have this self-defeating, self-hating talk where you just say, okay, I blew it. And so I'm fat and ugly and I'm worthless and I have no value and I'm lazy, and your brain just keeps going, adding way more words to the list, right? We've all been there. But the Bible tells us what to do in those situations. In 2 Corinthians 10:5, it says that we are to take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. So, take every thought captive? Well, so if you have thoughts that are true, you don't have to take those captive. So, I think a lot of times we pluck that part of the verse out and fail to read it in context. So if you go back and read the whole verse, not just the last part that people put on bumper stickers and on their Instagram and all that, go read the whole thing. It starts with, we are destroying speculations and every lofty thing raised up against the knowledge of God. And we are taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. What is a speculation? Speculation is not the truth. The speculation is just a theory. It's just an idea. It's a, you know, well, I had this feeling that, you know, I was just thinking that maybe this is how it was. Well, that's not the truth, right? Every lofty thing raised up against the knowledge of God. So it's not truth. It's against God. It's not His word. It's against His word. And so when it tells you to take those thoughts captive, it's telling you to take it by force. Think of in a war, when people take prisoners of war, they go and they take captive prisoners, right? Well, they don't just walk up and say, hey, I'm taking you captive, so, you know, you're captive now. No, they go by force, they handcuff them, they tie them, they do whatever, you know, they can to bound these people and take them as prisoners. They don't just bind them up, though, and leave them there. So even though you take your thoughts by force, you're intentional with it, you're deliberate with taking that thought and stopping. You know, let's go back to the diet example. You ate it all, you blew it, and now you're like, man, I'm worthless. Stop. That's where you take it captive. That's where by force you take that thought, right? But you don't just leave it. You don't just bind it up in your head and say, well, I'm not going to think any more thoughts. No, you're taking it and making it obedient to Christ, to His word. What does God's word say about you? Does God's word say that you're worthless? Does God's word say that you have no value, that you are lazy, that you're a horrible person? What does God say about you? So take that thought, be intentional with it, and stop. Don't let it continue and go on to a whole litany of other lies about you. Don't believe that stuff. Stop and take it to God's word and examine it. Does it line up with what He says about you in His word? Is it against God's word? Is it truth? And if it's not, make it obedient to His word. How do you do that? Get to know God's word. Get in His word and know it and have it saturate your whole life, your whole being, your mind, your body, everything. Take His word, memorize it, chew on it day after day, read it, pray on it, and memorize it in your heart. Keep it, hide it in your heart, just like David said in the Psalms. And that way, when those things happen, when you go through a situation that, you know, maybe it is traumatic, and you're in bed at night and you start going through all this stuff, stop. Don't do that. That's unhealthy. That is not helpful to you. Don't go through that whole thing of he said this, she said that, this is what's going on. Now look at who I am now. No, that's not what God says about you. So don't let your mind go down those rabbit trails of lies and unhealthy thoughts. Stop those thoughts and make them obedient to Christ. Bring them back to the light of God's word and know what his truth is, what he says about you and who you are.